Tom, a lot has been made of the Big 12's decision to backload their schedules off of last season's disappointment. As this team faces the most important and probably the most difficult part of its schedule, what have players seen in their new quarterback in Jarrett Stidham?
Well, a year ago, you rewind the clock a little bit, Kerry, Jarrett Stidham was also getting ready for another big game in the Texas Class 4A state playoffs for Stephenville. He was not getting ready to face 3 top 15 teams in the span of 14 days, which is what he'll do as a starting quarterback here for the Baylor Bears. Replacing Seth Russell, of course, whose season ended with a neck injury. All Stidham did in his first start was throw for more than 400 yards, 3 touchdowns without a pick, and lead the Bears to a win, which fuels the team's perception that he's not a backup, he's simply the next quarterback up.
It really is unbelievable, you know. He's 19 years old. He's really young and he's really talented. And, you know, just overall, he's staying poised and he's really confident.
It was borderline amazing. I mean, came in there, composed himself like he had been there. I mean, we always say there's no such thing as a backup, but, I mean, he really bought into that and came in there and played like that.
What impressed you the most?
Just the throws he made. I mean, I've seen him throw like that in practice, but, I mean, coming in there, I don't expect anybody to be able to throw like that in real life, but then he does it as 19. And in that type of game that we had, K-State's not just an easy team, so it was pretty amazing.
There are a lot of ways to measure the faith that Art Briles and the coaching staff has in Stidham at 19 years old, but consider, Kerry, this one metric. 3 fourth downs in his opening start on the road against Kansas State. They threw the ball on all 3 of those fourth downs. Stidham completed all of them, including one to Corey Coleman for a 38-yard gain. Art Briles loves to give nicknames to his players. To this point, he's calling Jarrett Stidham Studham. We'll see if he lives up to that nickname facing this gauntlet here as they get into the teeth of their schedule.
Let's dive right in, Gary.
Dive right in head first like Greg Louganis, coach to the Big 12. Number 6 Baylor hosting number 12 Oklahoma. Now, Baylor is a 3-point favorite. The Sooners, though, since that ugly loss to Texas, they've reeled off at least 50 points and 500 yards per game. So they're on a roll. Can the Sooners continue that roll against Baylor, at Baylor?
I like the matchup, and here's why. Oklahoma has rediscovered what it is offensively. They're running the football. They remember that they've got a guy named Samaje Perine. They've got a guy named Joe Mixon. They've run for 200-plus in every game since that Texas loss. They've committed to running the football. I think that's the thing. Baylor has not stopped the run. You know, in 3 games against teams with less than 500 records, Baylor has given up more than 200 yards rushing. They've had trouble stopping the quarterback run. Baker Mayfield can keep plays alive. Now, he's not, you know, Trevon Boykin, but he's a guy that can extend the play and keep drives alive. So I think this is a tough matchup for Baylor against an Oklahoma running game that's playing lights out right now.
Baylor's starting quarterback is a true freshman, Jarrett Stidham. He looked fantastic in his first career starting, but it was Kansas State. I mean, he threw for over 400 yards, accounted for 4 touchdowns. How can he handle the spotlight against the Sooners?
Well, it's a good thing, I think, for Stidham that his first game was on the road. And he looked like a guy who'd been there, quite frankly. It didn't seem to bother him. I don't think anybody was surprised, Kerry. Art Briles told me, listen, this kid is as good a freshman quarterback as I've ever had. He can throw the touch pass. He's got a big arm. He's got great players around him. I mean, look, we talk about quarterbacks. He's got skill guys. He's got a great offensive line. If Baylor doesn't win this football game, it's not going to be because of Jarrett Stidham. He can throw it. I think he'll be fine.
So who is going to win this game?
Well, I've got Baylor. I think Baylor outscores Oklahoma in a great football game. Both these teams offensively right now really hitting their stride. I think at the end of the day, in Waco, with Baylor's ability to score points in bunches, they run away, pull away, I should say, in the fourth quarter and win one of those shootouts that we've all become accustomed to in the Big 12.
Absolutely, and as that graphic shows, ESPN's FPI does predict Baylor having a 58% chance to win that game.
When you're this big, they call you Mister. The Big 12 we're focusing on isn't the 12 members of the almighty College Football Playoff Committee, but that conference with those high-scoring, highly entertaining games where defense is optional. The rhythmic offenses of Baylor, Oklahoma, TCU, and Oklahoma State have the rat-a-tat-tat of a David Mamet play. And now that we're into November, the play is the thing. Consider this. ESPN's Football Power Index gives no Big 12 team a better than a 37% chance to win the conference. lowest of any FBS conference favorite. Baylor has the best odds, but their true freshman quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, will really be put to the test versus Oklahoma Saturday night on ABC. The Sooners haven't won a national title since 2000, while Baylor and Oklahoma State have never won it all. And TCU, with their Heisman candidate Trevon Boykin taking a tumble last week, hasn't been the top dog since 1938, the year before Gone with the Wind was released. And for all those critics of these teams for shoddy D, frankly, my dear, they don't give a damn.
You know, it is what it is.
The Big 12 leads all FBS conferences in scoring, 36.7 points per game, and total offense with 484 yards per game. You like your quarterbacks? Big 12 quarterbacks also lead the FBS in total QBR this season at 70.2. The last Big 12 team to win a national championship was Texas in 2005, and only 2 teams from the conference have won national titles in the 21st century. So which team will restore the conference to glory? The odds of any team winning out are slim. TCU has the best chance with a scant 19%, which means the fireworks down the stretch will be worth watching.
This is the part of the season we've all been waiting for in the Big 12. Joining us to preview this weekend's action and talk rankings is ESPN's Max Olson and Jake Trotter via phone. Guys, let's start off with the game that has major potential playoff implications. Baylor and Oklahoma. The Bears have yet to play a team with a winning record this season, desperately trying to impress the committee, while Oklahoma has put up at least 50 points in 4 straight games. Max, who do you like?
I like Baylor to win its 4th game over Oklahoma in the last 5 years. I think it's, there's going to be so much pressure on the quarterbacks in this game, Jarrett Stidham and Baker Mayfield. I think Stidham has the advantage in this one because he's got the receivers. He's got Corey Coleman, he's got Katie Cannon, and I'm just not totally sure that Oklahoma's cornerbacks, although they've improved, can keep up with these guys. I still think that Coleman is going to make Jarrett Stidham look really good in this game, and I think it has the potential to be a 4-quarter shootout. And I think Baylor will ultimately get the stops.
Jake, who are you going with Saturday night in Waco?
Well, Baylor is going to score 40 probably just by showing up. I still think with this offense with Jarrett Stidham is very explosive. However, really like the way that Oklahoma has bounced back since that Texas loss. They lead all Power 5 offenses in rushing over the last 4 games, and they've really established Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon on the ground. Kansas State showed last week that Baylor is susceptible in run defense. I think Oklahoma will be able to keep up. And never underestimate Bob Stoops of the Sooners, where they're an underdog or nobody's expecting them to win. You can go back to Alabama 2 years ago. This kind of reminds me of that game where everybody thinks Baylor's going to win in a rout. For that reason, I'm picking the Sooners in the upset.
Sooners been on a tear lately. All right, let's talk some playoff rankings. Jake, you came out with an article this week on ESPN.com saying it's time for the Big 12 to panic with the latest set of rankings from the College Football Playoff Committee. Now, this time last year, remember, Mississippi State was ranked number 1. Ohio State was 8. Things obviously changed a lot by year's end. Why is it already time this year for the Big 12 to panic?
Well, listen, if Oklahoma State or Baylor runs the table, I think there's a very good chance they're going to get in. We're going to see upsets. It always happens. It happened last year. It's going to happen again this season. The one thing that I will say in observing the rankings the last 2 weeks, I don't think the Big 12 necessarily controls its own destiny, which is a problem because you would think in this conference with the depth of really good teams that a 12-0 conference champ would be a lock to make the playoff, and I think the committee is signaling that might not be the case. A lot of troubling signs in Tuesday's playoff rankings, so we'll see what happens. I think the Big 12 is still in good shape, but not as good a shape as, say, Ohio State or Clemson or Alabama, and who knows, maybe even Notre Dame.
Let's put record aside for 1 second, go simply with the eye test. Max, does Baylor or Oklahoma State look like one of the top 4 teams in the nation to you?
I think it's understandable that Baylor is not in the top 4 right now because they have not notched that signature win. And if they beat Oklahoma this week, I think you put them in there. I think that this Oklahoma team, despite the loss to Texas, is playing like one of the best in the country. They've really figured out all their problems, as Jake said. And for Baylor to do that with a freshman quarterback in their home this weekend, with game day, with the national audience and all that, a lot of pressure in that night crowd and all that. If they can handle that, they can emerge with this one. I think you move them into the top 4. To me, before they lost Seth Russell, they look like an elite team. And if Stidham shows up in this one, I think it's fair to put him in there.
All right, let's get to Texas and West Virginia. Mountaineers favored by more than a touchdown over the Hornets. Longhorns on Saturday. And the Longhorns have barely scored more than a touchdown on the road this year. 10 points in 3 true road games. Jake, who are you going with?
I'm going with West Virginia. I think the running game of Wendell Smallwood and Russell Shell is really going to fuel that offense. Texas has shown that, they're not going to score a lot of points. I think West Virginia is good enough offensively to win this one. I think they'll win it comfortably, too.
Max, Horns or Mountaineers?
I like West Virginia. I think that Texas is they've had so many problems on the road. You worry, of course, about how they're going to start with an 11 o'clock Central game there. And just, are they going to come out? Are they going to be able to score early? I just don't trust that offense enough. I think they're going to have a problem. I'm not really a Skylar Howard believer. I think Texas is going to be able to get to him. I think they're going to need to be able to force turnovers in this one. But I just don't think that Texas can pull this one off in the fourth. They just haven't shown it yet to believe that they can do it.
Last year, Texas did it against West Virginia with the ground game. Jonathan Gray and Malcolm Brown ran over West Virginia to the tune of 191 yards and 3 touchdowns. What does Texas have to do this year to beat the Mountaineers, Max?
Alex, I mentioned it's turnovers. Texas has not forced a single takeaway in any of their true road games this season, and it shows in the fact that they just have not been able to control those ball games, and that's how you let them get away. When you can't disrupt the flow of your opponent, things can go downhill very quickly, as we've seen several times this year. So they have to be able to get these interceptions like Deshaun Elliott grabbed last week. They have to be able to throw off Skylar Howard, who, like I said, doesn't have a great offensive line and hasn't really been all that good in Big 12 play. They've got to mess with West Virginia and really create opportunities for their offense.
Jake, what do the Longhorns need to do to win on the road?
They got to complete some passes. You cannot win a Big 12 game on the road without throwing the ball and moving it via the pass. And it would be great if Texas could, get the ground game going. That'd be all well and good. But you saw it against Iowa State. It's hard to move the ball down the field when you flat out can't complete a forward pass. So they're going to have to hit some plays down the field. They're certainly capable of doing it. They've done it at times this year. They just haven't done it lately. And, who knows what they're going to do at quarterback in this game, how much Swoops is going to play. But even if it's just Gerard Hurd, he has got to make some plays with his arm to keep that defense honest so they can do what they do best, and that's get going on the ground with Hurd and company.
All right, should be a good weekend of football with the Big 12 schedule heating up. From ESPN, Mr. Max Olson and Jake Trotter. Thanks, fellas.
Hi, guys. This is Ben Glicksman for SI.com. I'm here alongside Colin Becht, and we are heading into Week 11 of the 2015 college football season. And one of the biggest weekends comes when Oklahoma travels to unbeaten Baylor. Last year, Colin, this was a huge matchup as well. This time around, Baylor's looking to make its playoff case, but it's going to have to do it with a true freshman quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, stepping in for the injured Seth Russell. What did you see out of him in his debut against Kansas State, and do you think it will translate against the Sooners?
Well, in that debut, it looked like the offense didn't really miss a step with Stidham instead of Seth Russell. He led, I think it was 3 of their 4 scoring drives were under 2 minutes. That's pretty vintage Baylor fashion. And the 31-point total was definitely lower than what we've grown accustomed to. That really had more to do with what Kansas State was doing offensively, with really long, drawn-out drives on the ground to really grind out the clock. It had more to do with that than anything that Stidham himself was doing. So Baylor's offense seems to have not missed a beat.
Looking at Oklahoma is kind of a dark horse playoff contender here. Do you think they can keep pace with the Bears?
I think they can. I think what we've seen from Baker Mayfield, he was familiar, obviously, coming into the season with the air raid offense that Lincoln Riley brought in from his time at Texas Tech. And one of the big developments that we've seen since that Texas loss, I think that was a bit of a wake-up call for them to hey, we need to use Samaje Perine more, because they weren't really using him that much in the early part of the season. He's come on more, become a bigger part of the offense since then to give them much better balance. I think that's the type of critical thing that you need.
So game day is going to be there Saturday, going to be an electric atmosphere in Waco. Who do you think comes out on top?
I like Oklahoma to pull the upset in this one. I think they have the defensive edge. This is, we don't talk about the defense in the Big 12 much, but Oklahoma is one of the top in the country in yards allowed per play, and they can really get after the quarterback. So I think with that type of pressure they can bring, they can make Jarrett Stidham uncomfortable, give Oklahoma's offense a chance to outscore them. We have entered the point in the season where the Big 12 has key matchups every week, and this one will go a long way toward determining which team comes out on top in the conference. For SI.com, I'm Ben Glicksman with Colin Becht.